Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time and depending on when you're going to be seeing this video. It's your brother, your boy, courserepscorner. Like I always tell you guys, it's my corner, it's your corner, and it's our corner. This is an interview that was conducted by Channels Television, the hard copy, whereby our mother Beth Leonard, who happens to be the ambassador of USA to Nigeria, had an interview with her. And I hope that our another person who is also our mother, this Mrs. Katrina Ling, the UK ambassador to Nigeria, will learn from what this woman said. It's quite unfortunate that we have some persons who know the truth but they don't say it. So we want to thank our mother, who has Mommy Leonard, who has come out to say some very strong words talking about Beth Leonard. The interview was a wonderful one. I was very, very pleased, and I tell you, I was perplexed. Oh, English will not kill me. So I will not want to talk much. I would like to leave us with this interview. Please stay tuned.
Civil society organizations and observer groups have given their finding on the polls with mixed feelings. Tonight, I speak with the American ambassador to Nigeria, Beth Leonard, on her reflections on the polls. Ambassador Leonard has been in Nigeria for a little over 3 years and is approaching the end of a tour here in the country. So this interview was also a valedictory interview of sorts, encompassing her general impressions of the country and the development of her democracy. Ambassador Beth Leonard, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you for having me.
You've been in Nigeria now for over 3 years. What would you say was interesting for you? What did you expect to find different when you came in?
So, you know, it's interesting. I had been to Nigeria on 3 different occasions before I came as ambassador here. The first time was a million years ago when I was a first tour officer in neighboring Cameroon. I came to Nigeria for commercial training, and I always tell people I sort of felt like a country bumpkin in the big city. I mean, it's like, wow, this place is so cosmopolitan and busy.
You were in Lagos?
I was in Lagos, yeah. That was then the U.S. ambassador's residence, of course. I went to a reception there. It was the first time I ever went to a reception in an ambassador's residence. I was terrified. And then so I went back and continued on my tour, and fast forward to 2011, I was director for West African Affairs, and so I came out at the time when Terry McCauley was ambassador here just before the elections. And then Abuja, I remember looking at Abuja, which then was still, you know, a very new city, and not terribly lively.
Is it lively now?
Yeah, I think it's much more lively now.
Oh yes, certainly.
And so that was kind of the Abuja view that I had. And then I came back when I was ambassador to the African Union to Lagos for a conference on the African Continental Free Trade Area. And it's just a reminder, as was my work in the AU, of the centrality of Nigeria to the big decisions that affect the continent. So when I was back for that, conference, I actually went to a reception at what is now the CG's residence, of course, with the American Business Chamber. And at the point where the CG was making formal remarks, I was called out onto the patio for a telephone call. So he tried to say, oh, and there's Ambassador Beth Leonard. Oh, she's not here. And I was outside taking a phone call from the Director of Personnel at the State Department asking me if I would agree to be put forward as the nominee for ambassador to Nigeria. So I was like, oh, this is a rather full circle moment. But I think, so I came back and saw how much Abuja has grown, and indeed Nigeria has grown. There's a lot of great accomplishments in the last 20 years, in particular 23 years. But what stays the same is that Nigerians are still like these warm and welcoming and engaging and disputative and lovely people.
Thank you for the warm compliment. And I'm sure, you know, with it as Nigeria has grown, so has Nigeria-US relationship.
Yeah.
It's certainly changing focus now, or maybe not. I don't. You tell us. But in what ways would you say that our relationship, that's US-Nigeria relations, have improved?
So, you know, 6 decades of partnership, but really an awful lot of successes, but always areas to improve, right? So you know that we're a big contributor on HIV/AIDS through the President's Program for AIDS Relief. Spent billions of dollars. We're on the verge of epidemic control. Got 1.7 million people on treatment. Now you have to find the last few, and that's harder. So how do you strategize to do that so that you get to the finish line? And similarly, you know, we were engaged in a very big way on COVID, spending over $140 million, supporting not only the early days of testing and strategizing, but through the support for handing out 100 million vaccinations to Nigerians. So now the question is, how do we take what we've learned and the investments that we've made through HIV and COVID and integrate that more reliably into the broader health system to make it more effective? I think that's a big task ahead of us. And you can go through all of our various programs and see the sort of next steps. So we gave $350 million in humanitarian assistance, primarily in the Northeast and Northwest last year, and that's great. I mean, it went for food, for shelter, for water and sanitation activities. But in the longer term, how do we transform that into a more sustainable solution for people? How does that move from an emergency response to something more durable, I guess is the word you might use. If you're talking about cultural preservation, you know, we just brought back from the Smithsonian and a couple of other institutions 29 Benin bronzes. So great, they're here. And then what shall we do with them? What shall Nigeria do with them? Working to figure out not only just basic elements of curating, but, you know, how do we bring this cultural heritage, use it in a way so that museums and artists and people feed off each other and learn about a really deep and wonderful cultural heritage. It's a very exciting thought. Students, you know, our student visas issuances were up 12% last year, despite all the, you know, perturbations in our consular services as a hangover from COVID-19. Nigerians are about a third of all African students who go to the United States. They're the 10th largest foreign student group in the U.S. But moving forward, how do we get those visa wait times down? That's something that we need to improve on and that we're working hard on. Security cooperation. Great. We have a robust relationship on everything from doctrine to things like the sale of super tucanos, which the Nigerian military has been using very effectively. What's next? How do you use those tools to reinforce effectiveness and make sure that you're keeping civilians and your citizens from harm in the process? At the African Leaders Summit, Nigeria signed on to the Artemis Accords. And so how do we together, how does the world promote civilian cooperation in space? Climate crisis. I think we can perhaps link climate to some of the recent flooding in Nigeria, for which we gave some emergency financial assistance. But going forward, you know, how do you balance climate concerns with economic development goals of Nigeria on issues like access to power? So I think that there's a lot going on. We're always trying to do better, and my work in improving that is over, but I'm going to be watching from the sidelines with interest to see how it keeps going.
Well, so many areas that you've pointed to in terms of how Nigeria-US relationship, I mean, so many frontiers, to pursue, and so many frontiers upon which we can improve and cooperate, more or less. You just mentioned Nigerian students abroad, the fact that Nigerian students make a third of US foreign students population. While that is something that is to be celebrated, you know, Nigeria also has like a growing, I don't know if you've heard the word Japa crisis, you know, that's going on, and I don't know how you see that, whether it's, you know, contributing to your economy or maybe the dissolution of what is going on in the country as a result of the presidential elections, even before that time. How would you say that Nigeria and maybe the US can address this? I mean,
so, you know, in my work, in my world at the U.S. mission, it's all about making connections between Nigerians and Americans. And a lot of those connections happen sort of irregardless of venue. And we do a lot of work trying to bring communities together, like having the creative industries work with the U.S. creative industries and studying film production and techniques, or, you know, ties between the U.S. and Nigerian music industries, making business linkages. And I think that, you know, the fact that there are people outside of Nigeria as well, you know, is a blessing and a curse, if you will. But I think it's also wonderful. You know, the Nigerian immigrant population, the diaspora population, is among the most polished and educated among immigrants in the United States. And I think I've heard several of the candidates talk about the attractiveness of speaking to those people and seeing what roles that they can play. Some of the most exciting times that I have when I'm here is meeting young Nigerians who are educated in the U.S. and are back here doing cool things in technology that I struggle to understand. But I think it's the fact of that connection gives a lot of fertile ground for cross-pollination between the two. And I think the smart money is on trying to figure out how that can be done to the advantage of Nigerians here at home.
Well, let's go to it now. The U.S., the general elections, the Nigerian elections. You have come at a time, or you're leaving at a time when you also witnessed elections that have been described as the most consequential for Nigeria. You've also described them in those terms. Right. Why do you think they're the most consequential?
Well, I think you have to look at the where we live in 2023 in West Africa, right? So first of all, it's really consequential because just Nigeria is really consequential as the largest population and the largest economy. But you look at a West Africa that has coups and people hanging around for a third term, and those here, those standards of the democratic rules of the road are just part of the furniture. Everybody takes it for granted. People leave at the end of their terms. That's really, even despite all the frustrations and hurt hearts, if you will, of the last a couple of weeks with the elections, that really is something to be proud of as a beacon of hope in a larger continental sense. Certainly, yeah, you know, there were a lot of people who were frustrated. It's been an emotional time. Other people are happy and they're celebrating. I think the important thing to focus on is that, you know, there are ways to challenge things that you think went wrong in an election, and the president-elect has acknowledged and encouraged the right to do so, and the two major opposition candidates or the three, I think, are in fact taking advantage of those challenges. So, you know, that's why those legal processes are there, and we look forward to seeing those carried out to their conclusion, and we'll go from there.
Well, you encourage Nigerians, because you wrote an op-ed on this. You talked about the elections of February the 25th, and you asked Nigerians not to let the elections divide them even further. And a lot of people were hoping that there will be changes in the governorship elections. I don't know if you also paid a closer attention to what was happening in the governorship, and if there are areas where you thought there were improvements over the presidential elections. So
we're still, as everybody, kind of digesting the state elections over the week. I would say that from the perspective of process, it does seem that there were some improvements. You know, that results are being uploaded. You know, more stations, the polling units opened on time, and so that's a good thing. That the promise that was a little robbed of the first of the benefits of those technologies seemed to work better on the second time. So this is a good thing. You know, that shows you that there were some lessons learned and applied, and that's all one can hope after a period of disappointment. You know, I think too, clearly there have been some disturbing reports about voter intimidation, vote buying, and particularly in areas that were highly contested. My impression is that people think that the turnout of voters was low, even lower than the general elections, which was pretty low. And that's disappointing. You know, if you don't vote, you don't have your voice. If you don't participate, you know, we talk a lot, we speak a lot here about inclusion and diversity, getting more women voting, making sure that you're accommodating the needs of people with disabilities so that they can vote. And really it will be, I think, a lot of thought needs to be taken going forward about why more people didn't want to vote, what prevented them, and draw some lessons from that going forward. It should be something that every citizen rejoices in their ability to exercise their voice.
Well, you did say something about not letting Nigerians let the elections divide them. Right. It was seen that somehow these divisions have reared their heads again, and even in places as cosmopolitan as Lagos. I don't know if you had any concerns in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of my favorite lines. Thank you for using it twice. Don't let the elections divide you, because, you know, you need to be a united citizenry moving forward, and whoever is ruling this country also needs to deliver for all Nigerians and provide support to all Nigerians. I will say that I found particularly some of the ethnically charged rhetoric that came out, particularly in Lagos, to be disturbing. All ethnicities, all origins should have equal opportunities and should all be accepted by all. And I think that that's a category of event that Nigerians should think long and hard about going forward, about how to remove that instinct, how you tamp that back, because it's everybody has rights, and you want the rights to proliferate, not to be narrowed.
You're very worried about people, that's the players, especially politicians, playing by the rules. You want them to, stick with the rules as decided by INEC, as decided by Nigerians. And oftentimes, when that doesn't happen, I mean, we've heard that it so happens. I think in the past you've tried to call out those whom did not do well by the elections by denying them visas. Is it something that you intend to use again this time around?
Yes, so we reiterated our visa ban policy in January, I think, which basically exists to take people who engaged in things like rigging, vote buying, voter intimidation, attempts to interfere with the independence of the judiciary, and makes them ineligible for travel to the United States, and often also their family members. So our visa laws, I think what people find so frustrating about the visa ban is that because our visa laws are confidential, we don't publish a list of, here you go. But I can tell you that I am personally aware of people who have been so banned based on behavior in last elections. And I know personally of people whose travel has been impeded to go to the United States. So, as we go forward, the allegations that are being discussed now of, untoward behavior will certainly draw our attention in that regard.
Okay, but you're not going to publish a list.
No.
Would we be able to rely on some of the hearsays that we've heard? Just wondering.
Well, no, our records are confidential, so I'm sure there are a lot of people who are speculating, but unfortunately, we're not able to confirm or deny any of those. Okay,
so let's talk about Nigeria's democracy. I mean, elections are supposed to be a show of how democracy is also growing and maturing. Right. And you've talked about how Nigeria is consequential. Big Brother is supposed to be showing the example. How would you describe Nigeria's democracy, because compared with other African countries, in terms of freedom of speech, in terms of the freedoms that it allows, and even in terms of its I don't want to say it's election, but it's selection process, but let's say election process. Let's say election process.
Well, as I said earlier, first of all, we really have to give Nigeria some props for being the place in West Africa that is not following the path of some of the other countries in the region in unattractive ways. So, yeah, a proud region, yes, there are problems. But I think, if you look from 99 to now, there has iteratively been improvements in the process. Improvements that in the first round broke people's heart a little bit, because something that everybody was very much looking forward to see didn't work right away, and that was sad. But again, just the fact that now people who aspire to office understand that the citizens are looking for other voices, and it's not the same old show that it was before, and all of the political players now have to think about how they attract support from their citizens, and I think that's a really healthy thing. So, I'm kind of a glass half full kind of girl, and I think that there are many successes that you can look to, even along with some of the heartbreaks. And I think that, the change that we want is never as fast as we want it, but it's worth staying positive and trying to build on the improvements that have come, and think about how to improve it even more, given some of the disappointments.
What are the areas that you would hope that Nigeria would be improving upon in her next elections?
So I think that already the fact that the technology fixed itself in the second round, or the technology got fixed and worked in the second round, is good, because I think people were really relying on that. I think that it's perhaps less of a technical issue, but maybe more an issue of milieu, if you will. I mean, the vote buying is not an attractive thing, and I think that there are many parties that were guilty of that, and I think that Nigerian citizens and Nigerian political parties need to perhaps rethink the relationship between the governed and those who govern, and I hope that Nigeria's citizens will become more demanding in that regard, and not look for the it's one thing to get a small quantity of money or something on election day. It's another thing to have your government deliver the services and health and education that you need, and that's the sort of thing you would hope would inspire voters in the longer term, and you would hope would be the terms in which politicians phrase their démarche to the people.
Well, elections have happened between February and March. March is Women's History Month in the United States. We celebrated International Women's Day. I think yesterday was Mother's Day. Mother's Day happens on many Sundays within the month of March. And we've only seen, so far so good, yes, women vote in the elections, but in terms of political participation as well, imagine as candidates, the figures have been disappointing.
Yes, they
only
have.
3 senators declared so far for Nigeria's National Assembly, maybe figure a little better in the House of Representatives. What are some of the areas that you're hoping that women will be doing better in our elections, and how do you think we can encourage that?
Yeah, I mean, that was hugely disappointing. If women don't vote, if women don't present themselves as candidates, then they lose their voice and they lose the ability to be a part of the conversation about where this country should go. So, you throw away with not throwing away your vote, you're throwing away your capacity to influence the people who are coming. I was happy to see that finally there was a woman running for governor. I haven't heard the outcome of that race yet, but it is fairly astounding that there has never been a woman governor anywhere in Nigeria. We're going to have to keep supporting, I think, the civil society organizations and prodding electoral organizers and the government of Nigeria to think long and hard about how to enhance women's participation. It's something that the women ambassadors here feel very strongly, and in fact we just had about a month ago the second iteration of an International Women's Day Gala, in which this year it was US, UK, EU, France, Germany, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Australia, who supported the Gala Awards to recognize examples of women in leadership, sometimes in a political sense, sometimes in another sense. But I think in terms of finding voice and fostering participation, it's useful for people to see role models of women who have succeeded, and that was very much what we were trying to do with that event. So we hope that these seeds and others will bear fruit, because there is a startlingly disappointing level of political participation by women in this country. And Nigerian woman, as dynamic as any Nigerian citizen, I think it should be different.
Indeed. Just want to know, I mean, that is in the area of politics. What about entrepreneurship? I do know that you used to be a little partial to women in the past. Is this still the case in terms of supporting women entrepreneurs?
Okay, we like all Nigerians, but yes, we do. do like to support Nigerians in things like our, African Women Entrepreneurs Program to help people incubate their ideas, if you will. And of course, women are very much at the core of everything that USAID does here, whether it's, trying to think about the question of political participation or employment opportunities for women entrepreneurs, or, Feed the Future focuses on giving, one of our agriculture programs focuses on giving loans and credit to include women so that they become more successful farmers and sellers of products. We work very specifically and purposely on enhancing women's participation in education, and as well as in programs to reduce gender-based violence. So it's all hands to the pump, and it's definitely an area that's very near and dear to my heart, but I think it should be near and dear to the heart of anybody who wants to see any country, including Nigeria, grow. You need the participation of all of your citizens, not just some of them.
So what's next for you?
So I've been an ambassador 3 times now, and I've been in the Foreign Service for 34 years. So I'm actually going to retire to Massachusetts. Although, Massachusetts, you may remember, is in New England. It's a very cold place. My hometown had 2 feet of snow last week. It isn't the only reason I specialized in Africa, but a big part of it is I really do not like the cold. So I think you will find me back on the continent again, probably with a bias towards the months between December and March. But for now, I'm going to go home and sort out my house and maybe do some traveling. And I've already got about 3 speaking engagements lined up for people who want to hear about Nigeria. This country that will always stay with me, and I will always be a fan and a cheerleader, if you will, a clear-eyed cheerleader, recognizing some of the downsides for this unbelievably dynamic country.
Well, we certainly wish you all the very best.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for granting this interview.
It's my pleasure.